How's it going, everybody? And in this video, I'm going to be talking about anatomy and art. And this is something I've been thinking about in terms of my past experiences in undergrad and how those are tying into lessons that still apply as a medical student that I think is pretty cool. And so I wanted to share it with everybody. And the main lesson that keeps on coming up to me in terms of what I got out of my drawing and composition class as a freshman in college is this. And I remember that we all had our sketch pads and I was trying to draw what I was seeing, and it was timed, so we had 5 minutes during this art class to try to capture as much as you could from an object or a bunch of objects. And the teacher of that class kept coming up to me and telling me that I was going way too slow and that I was way too focused on little details that didn't matter. And, she specifically told me that, she didn't care what the wood grain looked like, and she didn't care, the way the reflection looked or the shadow looked. She cared about what the overall structure, what the shape was of the overall structure. Like, where did you see a circle or a triangle or a rectangle? And for me, it was something that I just had the hardest time being able to wrap my head around, this notion of, really kind of starting from a bigger view and then working your way down into like a smaller view where you can actually get to that level of detail that, I was just kind of defaulting to. And so I remember my art teacher during that class grabbing my hand and showing me that like in 10 seconds, she could get a general shape down of like everything that was in front of me. And that's something that I found is 100% applicable to studying anatomy. And the thing with anatomy is that there's so much material you gotta take in, so many structures that you gotta memorize. And my brain, just like during that art class, defaulted to zooming in on like a single muscle or a single nerve. And, I might be able to kind of understand that one little part, but until you get the bigger picture, you're lost. And until you're able to connect these dots and see why all the muscles that make up your anterior leg are so important for knee extension, you're really just focusing in on drawing little grains on a piece of wood, and you're not capturing the bigger scene that you need to understand for anatomy. And, anatomy is a really tough class for me. I struggled a lot through it, and I still do. And in the early days when I was studying anatomy, I thought it would be really great if I could try to turn on the part of my brain and blow the dust off it to, try to engage that visual component of my brain and just be like, can I draw these muscles? Can I draw the foot? Can I draw these bones in the foot? And the issue is that it's really complicated and really tough to do, to get, those 3 compound curves of your foot together. And even if you've done that and you've done a good job with it, you're still only looking at one layer of the foot. And the thing with muscles, like the plantar foot, the bottom of your foot, for instance, has got 4 different layers of muscles you gotta be super familiar with. And so for me, what I finally realized how to do in terms of the way in which I approach this material is to try to do what my art teacher taught me all those years earlier in my drawing and composition class, which is to basically start with just, it's almost like stick figures. Like you've got a head, you've got a body, you've got feet, you've got arms, that's it. You can do that in 2 seconds. And I apply a very similar thing to the way in which I diagram or conceptualize all these different muscles, is that I'll have anterior, posterior, medial, lateral. I'll have this coordinate system, and then I'll draw circles to denote the muscles, and I'll connect these muscles together and their relation to each other in those 4 orientations. And so I don't need to write down the adductor hallucis muscle. I can just write ADH and I can circle that. I don't need to write down the flexor digitorum longus muscle. I can just write FDL and circle that. And just by drawing out these circles and where they are in relation in 3-dimensional space, it's helping to contextualize all these different dots and bring them together, and also look at the innervations and why you can see the patterns that emerge from these innervations, because these nerves are very close by these muscles that they're innervating. And so for me, that was a really big step forward in terms of how do I improve the efficacy with which I study anatomy and prepare for all these practical exams. And so, to give an example, on the plantar foot, in a practical exam, they can remove or reflect, as they like to say, 2 layers of muscles and then pin some structure on the 3rd layer. And, by that point, I have diagrammed with those very quick sketches, not even sketches, but just those diagrams really of, layer 1, 2, 3, and 4 of that plantar foot, that when you see layer 3, when I see this thing reflected in front of me, you have these landmarks to look to. And so if you know that this has to be muscle A and this has to be muscle B, then you know that muscle in between has to be this, and that's how you do it for these anatomy practical exams. And so that's something that, I'm really realizing that the stuff that they teach in art, drawing and composition is super applicable to anatomy. And that's something that I think is really cool, to know that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to draw a bunch of details. It's really about just capturing that big picture stuff and being able to put it into context in relation to other things in space that you're trying to capture all these things about these objects. And so I'm going to wrap things up with that. And that's part of the reason why I think art is just a really fantastic complementary field to everything that we do. And I want to thank you all for watching. I hope everyone out there is doing well, and I'll talk to you guys next time.